Can a person voluntarily agree to be eaten? And even more, if someone accepts this request and carries it out, is it murder or is it a mutual agreement? Today, I will tell you about one of the most mind-boggling, shocking, and disturbing cases in modern history, Armin Meiwes, and the story of a man who voluntarily agreed to be consumed. This case offers a glimpse into the dark corners of psychology, the legal system, and human nature. The first question that comes to mind is, why would anyone willingly consent to such a thing? And even more frightening, why would another human being agree and carry it out? Armin Meiwes was a seemingly normal man living in a quiet town in Germany, but there was a dark desire growing inside him. In secret forums on the internet, he searched for someone who would voluntarily become his victim, and unbelievably, he found such a person. In this story, we will delve into the deepest corners of human psychology and examine the controversial legal aspects of the case. This is one of the darkest corners of the real world. Are you ready? After hearing the story, your view of the world will never be the same again. Born in 1961 near Kassel, Germany, Armin Meiwes looked like an ordinary boy from the outside, but his life was far from ordinary. When he was just 8 years old, his father abandoned the family. This left a deep void in Meiwes' life. After his father's death, his mother made him her personal prisoner. Growing up overprotective and oppressive, Armin lived in her shadow, cut off from the outside world. He was unable to make friends, make decisions on his own, and was subjected to his mother's control at every step. This created a growing sense of loneliness in him. As a child, Meiwes searched for something to fill her inner world and began to develop bizarre fantasies. His greatest fear was being abandoned and alone. Over time, this fear turned into a morbid desire to possess someone completely, to carry a part of them inside you forever. When he reached his teenage years, these fantasies began to take shape. The thought of eating human flesh became an obsession for him. But these were just thoughts, and for many years he lived these fantasies only in his own head. It would be years before he took steps to realize them. As Meiwes' mind drifted further and further into darkness, on the outside he appeared quiet, withdrawn, and calm. But this silence was an indication that a storm was brewing inside her, and eventually this storm would spiral out of control. Armin Meiwes' terrible crime began in the dark corners of the internet. In 2001, on a forum called the Cannibal Cafe, Meiwes posted a rather bizarre ad. "I'm not looking for someone who wants to live, I'm looking for someone who wants to eat." While this ad would be inconceivable to a normal person, it was too tempting for a man named Brandes. Bernd Jürgen Brandes was a 43-year-old engineer who, incredibly, responded to Meiwes' ad voluntarily. After a few email exchanges, Brandes and Meiwes decided to meet. Brandes said he really wanted to beat it and described it as a fetish. Meiwes, on the other hand, had the perfect opportunity to fulfill a fantasy he had been harboring for years. Brandes arrived at Meiwes' big old mansion. Here they began to act according to their agreement. First, at Brandes' request, tranquilizers and large quantities of alcohol were consumed. One of the most horrifying episodes took place. Meiwes had his genitals cut off at Brandes' request and they tried to eat together. However, the situation did not turn out as expected. Brandes was in severe pain and began to bleed rapidly. Meiwes took Brandes to the bathroom and left him in the bathtub, watching him bleed out. Hours later, Brandes was still not dead and in excruciating pain. Meiwes told him to go to the attic, where he struck the final blow, killing him. After the murder, Meiwes dismembered the body and stored the meat in the kitchen freezer. This horrific incident provided the evidence that would later lead to Meiwes' arrest. Armin Meiwes went unnoticed for a long time after he killed Bernd Jürgen Brandes and ate his flesh. However, this would not be his last victim. After Brandes' death, Meiwes turned to the internet again to continue his terrible habit. Meiwes started posting new ads on the forum, The Cannibal Cafe. He was describing his previous experience, looking for new volunteers interested in cannibalism. This time, however, some users on the forum realized that he could be a real killer and reported him to the authorities. Armin Meiwes' house in Germany was raided by the police. What they saw when they entered was blood-curdling. Although the house looked quite tidy, the packaged pieces of meat in the fridge stood out. Authorities found about 20 kilos of human flesh hidden in the freezer. Meiwes had videotaped the murder and its aftermath. When the police examined the evidence, it was clear how horrific it was. Meiwes was brought to trial when he was captured in 2003. At the first trial, his defense was that Brandes had volunteered. He was therefore only sentenced to 8 years and 6 months in prison for attempted manslaughter. However, as the shocking details of the case spread in the media, there was a public outcry. Prosecutors stated that the verdict was too lenient and the case was retried. In 2006, at the second trial, Armin Meiwes was sentenced to life imprisonment. Meiwes in prison. In interviews in prison, he said he had now moved away from his cannibalistic tendencies and had become a vegetarian, but his story remains one of the most disturbing crimes in modern history. The case of Armin Meiwes is not only a murder case, but also a case of great controversy in terms of law, morality, and human psychology. The biggest controversy of the case has been Brandes' voluntary death. In murder cases, there is usually no consent of the victim, but in this case, Brandes was a victim who wanted to beat himself. Legal experts debated the question, can a person gift his or her own life to another person? Although Meiwes' offense was initially mitigated, after public outcry and a retrial, he was sentenced to life in prison. This decision set a precedent that killing someone who wanted to die voluntarily is still a crime. Meiwes gave many interviews after his capture. In prison, he said that he was now a vegetarian and recognized that eating human flesh was morally wrong. However, instead of expressing great regret over the incident, he has made statements implying that he regrets having been caught. Psychologists and researchers wondered whether Meiwes would have killed again if he had not been caught. According to police reports, Meiwes was looking for new victims. In interviews in prison, he claimed that he only planned to commit the murder once. However, psychologists believe that this impulse is very likely to recur. It revealed one of the darkest aspects of human psychology. Cannibalism was not just a hunger drive, but had deep psychological roots in power, control, and addiction. The case of Armin Meiwes is one of the most horrifying events of the modern era. This horrific story, which shows the extremes of human nature, once again confirms the saying, the truth is sometimes more frightening than the worst nightmares. What do you think about this? Let's discuss in the comments.